Hello, welcome to the journey of grief, becoming us without them. I'm Barbara Field, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I created this channel so that people would have a space to talk about grief and all aspects of grief. And today, I'm very happy to introduce you to my friend Ricki Townsend, who is an interventionist, among many other things. And Ricki has provided support services for families affected by addiction for a long time. And she's going to help us today talk about the grief involved in being a family member of an addict, whether they just live a long time in their addiction or they die in their addiction. There's just lots of letting go. And so, Ricki, welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this. And please introduce yourself and tell us all about your work.
Hi. I was telling Barbara, part of my work used to be as a chaplain with law enforcement, as a first responder, and I worked that and hospice for about 3.5 years and decided to let that go because my heart just couldn't take all that grief, leaving as a first responder in the hospice and then losing loved ones like my clients that I got to know very well to substance abuse. So I think, more importantly, when you asked me to do this, Barb, I I thought, really, who am I to do this for my families? They should be here. So what I did was I put out an email to all the families I've ever been able to work with. I asked them for feedback on what they would like to have known. So I have notes around me. So if I'm looking down, it's because I want to be sure that I don't forget someone or forget what they would like me to say. So I think it's important to understand how I first started. Clean and sober, I was already an interventionist and a counselor, substance abuse counselor. But Clean and Sober Treatment Center over on Chestnut was looking for a family counselor. Someone said, "Hey, Ricki, you might be interested in interviewing for this." So I did. And I told them, though, that I would love to do it, but would not like to be paid for it. I wanted it completely to be volunteer, and I would do it for 6 months and then we would review it. I ended up there 15 years doing this free every single Sunday at 11 o'clock. And so, when I first started with them, it was me thinking I had all the answers. And I brought PowerPoints and lots of things to talk about. And then it went on, and I realized, in fact, it got to be a joke with the families that we never went past maybe 2 or 3, 4 slides. That was it. Everything else was about the families. And I guess what the slides did was encourage them to talk about whatever that slide was. And so I quit doing PowerPoints after a few years. So Clean and Sober were kind enough to open this up free to the community also. So people were coming who had clients in Clean and Sober, and they were coming in from the community also. And there were times when we would have about 40 people there. When COVID hit, we then moved it to Zoom. And I really liked the Zoom better because I was able to ask people to come and speak, counselors or doctors. My primary care came and spoke about childhood issues, that if you were in really, really poor childhood situations, what you would bring with you as an adult, and disease. So he spoke about that. I had actually trust lawyer come on and speak So that because families had a lot of questions about what do I do? I don't want him to have all this money or her if I pass. So that was wonderful with Zoom. And we did that. I just after 15 years, and I think it was 23, ended it. I just told the families, I'm kind of feeling like I'm done. And we still have emails. I have a big email group of over 100 people, and that's the families that I asked to support this. So this now, I am just working more as an interventionist, and of course, as an interventionist, this is a family disease that you, Barb, know brings so much with you. One of them is, what do I do if I pass? What's going to happen to them? That in itself is the grief that just overwhelms them, is that their child will be alone or their loved one will be alone. I mainly deal with young adults. I don't deal with teenagers. I didn't do that for a long time. I'm more with the young adults. I can relate, and then their parents and husband and wives also. So I asked them to let me know what kind of a world they live in, because once your loved one becomes a substance abuser and that is their only way of living, families don't know what to do. And I'm included in that. I have a son 10 years in recovery. I have 40 years in recovery now. I have a son who we are very aware is probably enough now, and I've had to have him not be in my life. And the grief that overwhelms you is that you've lost the dreams, all of the things you ever dreamed for them. Children graduating from school, or our loved ones getting married. Um, so it's the hard part for me, for families and their grief, is that yes, they're grieving, but the world doesn't see them. The families are seen as, really, they're not even really thought about that much in our news. Substance abusers are. And the families see that a lot of the public feel like their child, and I'm going to more relate to the young adults or the older adults who are on the streets or really using right now, but the public sees their loved one as an animal, really, and they don't care about them. They see them lying on the streets and they walk past them. I can't tell you how many I have gone up to and given them a little bit of money, maybe $1, or I bought them dinner. But the one thing I always ask them is, honey, what are you doing out here? This is a rough place to be. And you are someone's child. That's what I feel. When I am on the streets, driving, and I see people handing up signs for food and all that, we know what it's for. We know it's for probably their addiction. But what I see is, oh my God, that could have been one of my clients' loved ones. But most of the public don't see it that way. They see it as an inconvenience, and they see it as dirty, and they want it to go away. And how many times have we heard that homeless are carted off to some other city for some other neighbor of ours to have to deal with? So families are going through that. They feel alone. And I remember in one of my groups, this father said, you know, Ricki, I am really angry. Well, that's the first time back then that I went, oh my God, this is all about grief. This is all about bargaining with God or the universe or with our loved one. You know, we minimize it. That's the first thing you see when you see someone new coming into a meeting, is that they spent a long time minimizing what their loved one was doing. Oh, it's just experimenting, that kind of thing when they're young. And then as they get older, they go, oh my God, I thought he was just experimenting or she was, but they're not now. Um, it, they became isolated and families become isolated. I did an intervention on a family, and the husband had called for it and the kids because it was mom. And the son was in recovery and he was excited to be able to show his mother a new way to live. Mom still didn't want it, even though she went through that with him. So the young man was going through this grief of oh my God, you know, what if something happens to my mother and she dies? I was the one that could have saved her. And that's the same thing families do for their loved ones, is how can I save them? So families are really the heart. If you ask any professional interventionist, they're going to tell you, my power is the family. I can bring them on board, talk to them, share with them experiences, and then we go and we move in to the intervention world. And once they become that empowered, a lot of times the loved ones will go into recovery. And so I I think what family go through, like you were saying with grief earlier, is even when they're alive, you have this grief you go through, and a lot of it has this expectancy. Oh my God, what am I going to do if he dies? Or the chances he's going to die. Families have one family that um, texted me back or emailed me back, I think is really important to know about those home lists that you see. She has been with me. I've known her for years now. One of her sons was on the streets in LA. And so she was filled with the grief of sadness. She was filled with the grief of bargaining with him, trying to anger with him at him, anger many, many times at ourselves because we think, what did I do wrong? Which is so not fair, and it's not real. And she let him go for many years. He moved to LA and she'd hear from him once in a while. She offered treatment. She had it all set up for him. No, no. Well, just I think a year or two ago, she decided to hire a private investigator because her grief was so overwhelming. She felt like she had to do something so that she could go through those grief process and come to acceptance in whatever it was. And so this kind of reflects anyone who's going through grief with substance abuse. She hired the private investigator. He found him, but the son didn't want anything to do with anything. So she let it go, and then just recently decided she really for herself needed to find him, to try to talk with him, to offer him things, and not, to accept what was going on. So she and her husband drove to LA. The private investigator found him. They got to meet with him, and he he was very, very kind, and compassionate. But for him, he had made a community there. And she said she was with them maybe for about an hour. And he told her basically, this is my community, Mom. I have great friends here. I have people who understand me here. I don't want anything more. I'm okay, basically. I'm basically telling Mom, live your life, Mom. I'm living mine. This is the way I want to live it. And so he drove off on his bike, and that was it. And she said, at first she didn't even think he would show up, but he did. And I don't know if you want to use the word closure, who can have closure on something like this? But what she has is that she has some acceptance. And like she has said, she goes to bed sad for him because she said he was pretty emotionless. And of course, that is addiction in the brain, and our empathy, all of that. But she now has an acceptance that this is what he's going to end up. And does that make it easier? I believe it makes it easier in a sense. But when the time comes, if she lost him, that grief is still going to be overpowering. But the one thing I say to all of my families is when I do an intervention, is that this is not for them. This is for you. This is so you can know if something happens to them, you did everything humanly possible to help and support them into something different, a different life. So this mom now has that to fall back on.
That's great.
Yeah. So are there any questions that come up for you?
So how about if you tell us more about the responses you received from your families? What do your families want us to know?
They would like to know that even in recovery, that it doesn't end the fear. It doesn't end the grief process. It puts you in a different processing, but the grief is still ongoing. You're still trying to bargain a little bit. You're still minimizing. You're still doing all of these things. And once in a while, you're in anger. But recovery doesn't mean that you're done. And I think in the end process, when they are in recovery, and let's say they've been there for a couple of years, I think it's surprising that we don't feel like, yay, it's all done. They're living their best life. Nothing ever is going to happen again. And one of my families was there. They had several years. I knew their son well and loved him. And he decided that he was more addiction to the drugs and not alcohol. Decided he could have a beer here and there. And they were concerned, but they didn't say anything. That it's his life to live. He was an adult. He decided that he wanted more of a spiritual journey, and he quit his high-tech job and got himself a van. Mom and dad supported him because they knew there was nothing more they could do, that you can't tell an adult what to do, or you get into arguments, and they didn't want that. They wanted to let him live his best life and what he decided to do. He went off in the van and headed to Oregon and Washington. He was there and unfortunately overdosed in his van. And mom and dad got that phone call. And it still hurts my heart because I knew him very, very well. And I know mom and dad very well. So one thing they wanted to say is that in that grief, they do know, though, that he was in recovery for some time. He was living this wonderful, loving life. They were very close, all of them, and that they had to let go. And they did. And that's what they're in their grief, probably the proudest of, is that they didn't argue with him. They didn't try to force him to be something he's not. Other families, like the family with the homeless, wanted families to know they're not alone, that there is Al-Anon, or there are counselors, there are therapists, there are groups, Celebrate Recovery, there's Nar-Anon, there are all of those. There's Buddhist recovery. There's all sorts of recoveries that families can get into, that they're not alone. And they want them, hopefully, to take that step so that they're not in that deep grief of just feeling alone, of feeling the sadness, that they can kind of move out of it and know they're not alone with other families.
Talk a little bit more about that aloneness. So, like, when we're a member of a community, what we talk about is our kids and our grandchildren and their successes and their vacations. And so, no, I'm not that family all of a sudden. I'm the one who has the kid who doesn't fit any of that, who's not brag worthy. I can't exactly come to the picnics and talk about my son's homelessness. So those are the kind of things people lose. They lose community. They lose their hopes and dreams for their children. They lose their bragging stories. So talk more about the specifics that are involved in the pieces that everybody takes for granted that families with an addict lose.
One of the things that I want to start off with that piece is remember that that parent or that person is your clerk at the store, is at your grocery store when you pass by, is your person selling the clothes at our Lowe's or Home Depot. Those are those families that we need to try to stay in compassion and kindness all the time, whoever we deal with, because that family member could be the one that has somebody out there on the streets that they're worried about. And maybe right then when you're paying your bill, they're maybe angry or they're sad and they're not smiling. And we leave thinking, oh, well, what the hell's with them? Please know that could be it. And that's the one thing that parents are, through the years have always said about is, I can't go to those picnics. I might be working and I can't share with my coworkers that my kid's on the street, or my kid just tore up my whole living room, or my kid is at the front door screaming to let me in and he's high as a kite and I've just had to call the police, because they feel that that is on them, that coworker is going to think you're the problem. What'd you do to that kid? That. So the grief, as you just mentioned, Barb, is old, incumbent. I mean, it is the grief of not sharing my child's dreams with my coworkers. I can't share who my child is now. The grief is having to go to work and put on this smiley little face, getting in my car, and maybe even before I start my car crying. because I don't know where my child is. Or pulling into your driveway and not wanting to go into your home because you don't know what you're going to find. Um, I've had a mother dealing with cancer at the same time that she had downstairs her son falling and trying to cook alcoholic, trying to deal with all of that. So those are the things that families deal with on the outside. Um, our homes are supposed to be our sacred space. For me, when I drive in, my heart's just so excited. My husband's here, my dog is here greeting me. For them, it could be just some kid who's locked in a bedroom and has a deadbolt even on it, and you don't know what to do because you don't know what to do. So that's why community is so impactful for them, is they have an idea now with support on what they can now do. Oh, I can, I've had a SWAT team guy who had to call police and had to have eviction going on in his home. And so you don't think that that father, and the mom was a teacher, you don't think that those two parents have this guilt and shame that they carry, that their son is the alcoholic in a hoarding bedroom that they now have to give a 30-day notice to. And it took them, I think it was somewhere 3 to 6 months to get him out of because of the eviction process, out of their own home. So we, and thank you for doing this for these families. I mean, in every way, Barbara, because whoever is watching this, I want them to know with all my heart they're not alone. There are meetings, find one. There are people that can call and finally confess, this is what I'm going through. And I plead with them to do that because we all know what stress does to our body. And I know my own mother just passed away in December, and in my family, I had a betrayal, a terrible betrayal after my mom passed away. And I cried. I was in shock, and I realized I needed that support because the grieving was honestly being put on hold. And I think that that's what families are doing in the beginning. Their grief is on hold till I do this. I'm going to have to do this first. I got to do this first. They've got to get into recovery. Then I'll take care of myself. We can't. We have to be number one because of what the stress does for us. And so that's what I hope that you are bringing to them, is a safe place to learn and then go, aha, maybe I can go to an Al-Anon meeting.
That's great. And so let's develop a little bit more. So people in addiction talk about losing themselves, but I don't know that families have enough of a voice, because this is an ongoing, this can last years and years and years. And people who don't have addicted children have the privilege of moving through the normal stages of parenting, right? Labor intensive in the beginning, a little rowdy in the teen years, and then they go off and become adults. They're done. You get to hang out with your friends, they get to hang out with their friends. But when you have an addictive kid that's kind of chewing on the back of your mind all the time, even when you are entering a phase where it could more typically include travel, include deepening your peer relationships, include getting that second place in Florida, either the money is being sucked out of your family by trying to get this person in treatment, or you're afraid to leave your house unattended for fear of what you'll find when you get back. There's just so many pieces of being a human that get stolen away from people. Like just the simple privilege of sleeping peacefully through the night, night after night, going to bed knowing, sure, we live in a world where bad stuff happens all the time and could happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, these families don't get to go to bed and think, oh, what a nice day I had. I mean, they can. That's what we learn in Al Anon and Codependence Anonymous, is how to progressively put that down and develop a self that can be a self and not half of someone else or a reflection of someone else. But still, it's always niggling. There's no peace being a member of a addicted family that doesn't weigh on you. Like my mom and her drinking, you just didn't know what might happen or
Right. They
who
might
might be involved in that or what that might look like. And so it's just sitting there all the time.
always in your gut. It's always in your gut. That phone ringing. Could that be him asking for help? Could that be him begging that he's ill? Or is that the police officer or the chaplain calling? I did many of those. I had, because the county coroner was too busy, I would go and have to share with someone that their family member had died in another state of alcoholism. And it is that constant dread that they walk around with. Or the family member who honestly is sleeping with her pillow, under her pillow is her purse or her wallet, because she can't trust, even sleeping, that he might come in and snag her purse. I've had many families have to do that. And then family members are awakened to, with Al-Anon and all the things that all the other groups that we've mentioned, they wake up to realize they do need the peace for themselves, that they are the power, if there is any power. It's not the word power, it's the I no longer am going to enable you power. I have bought you 3 cars. I have helped you get jobs. I have paid for your bills. I paid for your phone. I paid for this. I paid for that. They come in finally and say, no more. And what I encourage my families to do is, you don't just all of a sudden, boom, cut everything off. You have a sit down with them or a phone call, whatever it is that you need to do. And you share with them, I've been paying this all this time. Now I would like to give you time. I'm going to give you a week. I'm going to give you 2 weeks. I'm going to give you a month, whatever deems necessary for you. I will no longer be paying for your apartment. I will no longer be paying for your car, your phone, all those things. Although I will say, I encourage families to keep paying the phone. That's their lifeline. Sure, they can get drugs from it. Sure, but it's a lifeline between you and me. So families wake up, and they wake up not to I'm being stupid. They wake up to, oh my goodness, I've got to find peace. I need to let them live their life, whatever it is. And I need support. And that's where you and I and others can be so helpful to them.
Yeah, part of support is having an addicted family member is like opposite land. And you need other families that can help you learn the map of opposite land to navigate opposite land. So the things that loving parents typically do for their children gets labeled as enabling. And you're like, no, but loving parents do this. Yes, loving parents do this, but are you helping to maintain a lifestyle that's bad for your kid? So loving parents support their children's growth and change. Is this child growing and changing? So is this support for them, or is this to take away your pain? So you've got to have people to help you figure out how to live in opposite land, because there's stuff that you would do for a kid that's not addicted, that it is not a good loving choice for a kid that is. And there's things you have to do for a kid that is addicted that are loving things that you would never have to do for a kid that isn't addicted. So you can't navigate this. It's hard enough parenting, just parenting without support.
Yeah.
And then when parenting goes off the rails, you absolutely have to have support. It cannot be done alone.
No, it can't be. I will tell you, when I got into recovery, my eyes were awoken a couple of years later that my son was in substance abuse, and I started going to parent classes, went to Al-Anon, went to bunch of recovery stuff to be a better parent. And when I sat with him and gave him the rules of the house, because it was just he and I living together, he said, "Oh yeah, mom, yeah, yeah, yeah." But then he broke it, and he broke the rule, and I had to ask him to leave. And he lived on the streets, I think, for maybe a year in Fair Oaks and all over. And I never stopped loving him. And I want families, I'm glad I brought this up because I want families to understand, don't stop loving them. They're your, if that is you, um, I couldn't. And so I loved on him. That meant maybe taking him some lunch. Maybe that means taking them water. Maybe that takes them to go give him a sleeping bag. That's love. That's not enabling so much as you're doing it for you to share your love, that they're still your child. And so I remember one day I had written my son a check. This is way back when, and it was like maybe $25. Well, all of a sudden he decided that he and all these guys were going to go to Orange County. They had jobs there. He pulls up and he comes running up the stairs, and he didn't live with me. And he comes running up the stairs and, "Mom, you got to go to the bank and cash this check. I'm leaving right now." Well, I said no. I'm not going to go jump in my car and do this. I had things and appointments, and so I said no. And as I was upstairs, I'll never forget this. I saw him get in the car downstairs, and I sat there and I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed. I wondered if it was the last time that I would ever see my child. And thank God, fast forward to the future, he now has 10 years and he's 59, almost 60. So I went through a lot of that. But I asked my son just recently, "Honey, when you were going through what you were going through and you had to live on the streets, and did you know I loved you?" And he said, "Mom, with all my heart, I never, never not knew that you didn't love me. I knew you loved me with all your heart." That's what I want to hold for other parents too, that space of loving them, if that is who you want to be. I mean, there are some that can't, but most of us can. And I encourage you to not feel bad about that.
Great. So, okay. So, if nobody listened to anything that we said on this entire video, what is your 1 minute of wisdom? If people just learned this one thing, carried this one thing away with them, you would feel like you did what you came here to do. So what is your 1 minute of wisdom?
Wow, what a question. Please be kind to others. You don't know what they're going through. That's a biggie for me. Um, please know that that person on the street could be your best friend's child and you don't know it, or your coworkers. Um, and to take care of yourself. This year, that's been the most important thing for me, is seeing a therapist to get through the trauma that I went through with the betrayal that I'm still going through. But my son, finding out this year that my son is probably using meth now. He's lost his home, lost his family, and he's lost me as far as support, and any other ways but love. And by the way, Barbara, this is a child that I had him when I was 15 years old, and he was taken from me. I never saw him. I never said goodbye to him. And when he was 30, I found him. So from 30 to 60, we have been best friends. He calls me mom. We go on vacations together. His biological parents are no longer in the picture. They've passed away. And so to lose him again, this is what some families are going through. They go into recovery. So I'm saying to you, families, take care of yourself. I know that I have had to do this. And I hope that's what you will do.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you giving us your time to talk about this. And I really hope that people share this so that more and more people can understand what the families of addicted people are going through, because there is so much. They lose so much. They can lose themselves, they lose their health, they lose their dreams, they lose their time, they lose their child. And this
Yeah.
is like extended caregiver through decades.
Yes.
And there's widows associations, right? Well,
Yes.
Al-Anon and Coda, those are
Yes.
places where people with the ongoing never-ending grief or the final grief of losing a child to addiction have their people who understand them. And I hope people take themselves to those places. And I want to thank you for your 15 years of providing that service, because it
Thank
was
you.
so important.
Thank you. I just want to say one last things to my families, because they're going to get, when you send me the YouTube, they want to see it. I want to say to them, thank you for teaching me. Every meeting they taught me unbelievably. And I thank them for making me a better interventionist and a better mom and a person.
Well, thank you. And I will see you later.
All right, Barb, thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.